still remember what he told me. He said, Travis, we were here before you got here, and we'll be here a long time after you're gone. And if you need to find another job, then that's what you're going to have to do.
Welcome back to the #1 podcast that teaches people how to get paid what they're worth. I'm your host and resident human behavior nerd. Super excited about today's guest, you guys. You should be too. My guest today is none other than the infamous Travis LeFever.
Hey.
A serial entrepreneur who started and successfully exited 3 businesses, ran corporate turnarounds for 3 years, and has spoken and taught in 8 different countries. You know, he's worked with some big name clients like Facebook, Kraft and Tyson Foods, Loctite, every branch of the military, Ripley's, believe it or not, and NASA. That's just to name a few. But mostly he's my husband. He's my baby daddy and the bug killer in our house. So mainly that's what he does, especially since we're all working from home these days and it's springtime. There are a significant amount of bugs for some reason. And we live in the woods, and we found a snake the other day in my garage after I set up my workout equipment out there, and I'm not excited about that. Anyway, so if this interview gets a little off the rails like it just kind of did, it's because we've been cooped up together with my mom and our 4-year-old daughter for like 3 weeks straight. Nonetheless, he has a few decades of experience as in the executive ranks, leading people, managing people, and negotiating compensation. And he agreed to come on the show after I asked him multiple times over coffee and stuff, and basically said that he had to. So he's going to share some of the things he's learned about getting a raise with us. So thank you, Mr. LeFever, for coming on the show. How's your self-isolation going?
It is good. An interesting thing, of course, stuff we have never seen before, done before. A lot of things we're doing, as you know, we're working on from home, so at least we're being productive. And if I have to be marooned with anyone, I can't think of anyone else I'd rather be marooned with. You're my person.
Well, thanks. Let's talk about getting a raise at your job. My first question. Are you ready?
I'm ready, I think.
What is your best advice for someone who feels undervalued at work?
Undervalued. So that question hits at a lot of different levels, I think. In my experience, feeling undervalued has a lot less to do with your paycheck and a lot more to do with the leadership at your company or at your office. You know, you can be making $10 an hour and a team culture make you feel valued and wanted, and you want to get up and go to work every day. Or I've seen people making $500,000 and they're miserable and feels like nobody cares about them. So, you know, that's probably a little bit off topic, but if somebody came to me and said, hey, I don't feel valued at my job, my best advice is to find another team to play on. You know, that's a leadership failing, a culture. All the money in the world doesn't make necessarily people feel valued. Making more money obviously makes it more tolerable, though. There's sometimes no way to escape a toxic workplace, especially in the short term. So, you know, if you're just talking about getting a raise, I could help a little bit. Is that, you want to go into like the money part?
Yeah, I'm talking about the money part.
The money part.
Yeah, for sure.
So I remember like my first real experience about asking for a raise myself. It's kind of a funny story. I was working at the Raleigh-Durham Airport here in North Carolina, and I was co-oping with UPS. I remember I started at $7.15 an hour, I think it was back then,
Nice.
The minimum wage. And if you don't know what UPS does at the airports, on the night shift, we load all the overnight packages from the Piedmont here into 757s and DC-8s, and they fly up to Louisville, Kentucky for the big overnight sort. And then on the morning shift, those aircraft would come back in. We would unload all the next day air packages and, you know, distribute them all over North Carolina. But it was really hard work. It was, you know, rain, snow. We were out on the tarmac. You know, summer, it was super hot. And after about a month of this, I realized that I felt like that I was outworking everybody else. I'm sweating my rear off out there, and I was already supervising people. I was, really helping out. And so I went to my boss after one of the shifts was over. I was like, "Hey, Jerry, how am I doing here?" I was kind of setting him up, and of course he told me, how good I was doing and how much he appreciated me, and said some nice things, and then I delivered like the blow, right? I was like, "Well, I've been thinking this is really hard work, and I think I should be making more money, and if we can't work something out, then I'm gonna have to go find another job."
Mm.
And I learned pretty quick, in fact, I still remember, whatever it is, 20, 25 years later, I still remember what he told me. He said, "Travis, we were here before you got here, and we'll be here a long time after you're gone. And if you need to find another job, then that's what you're going to have to do."
Excellent.
So my first piece of advice, before I tell anybody how to get a raise, I'll tell people how not to get fired.
Oh, yeah, that's
yeah.
helpful too.
So that piece of advice is never give your boss an ultimatum or try to take advantage of a bad situation. And I think that that's appropriate, like with the COVID-19, like what we're going through now in a recession. Like a lot of companies or a lot of people might feel like, "Hey, I've got my boss like right where I want them, like over a barrel. They need me here to sell or to, help with operations or to drive or whatever it is. And it's a perfect time to like really get them for more money."
Yeah.
And it is not the perfect time.
No, it's a really bad time.
A horrible time to put anybody over a barrel.
Well, and even for yourself, too, because of the situation. I mean, if you give them an ultimatum and they're like, "Okay," and you don't have any other options.
Yeah, you got to, work out your options. And that's something that, I've kind of been thinking about since you asked me to come on, like, what are people's options? But I'm sure you want me to tell you, like, what I would do, right? Not just what I wouldn't do.
Yes,
I
of course.
wanted to get that out of
I
the
like
way
the
first.
would not. That was helpful right from the beginning, especially in our current situation. So, what would you do then? Let's go that route.
So my second piece of advice, and I got some notes here, is to first put together some hard data about what you might be worth on the market today and what you're bringing to that business in terms of hard dollar productivity or savings. And then once you've gathered that information, to present that to your boss with a reasonable ask, and not as an ultimatum, as a request. I'm big on the 3-sentence ask. And if you're not familiar with the 3-sentence ask, it goes something like this. Get your pencil ready. You've always been a good boss. This has always been a great place to work. You know that we work well together and what I contribute to the team. I've even made a list for us to talk about. And then the third sentence is, if it makes sense, based on what I'm bringing to the business, I'd ask you to consider an increase in my compensation of $10,000 a year. Is that fair? And that would be the conversation that I had with my boss.
Nice. Well, that sounds interesting, to say the least. So I hadn't heard about the 3-sentence ask, but I want to go back just to what you had said before that. You said to gather data, like hard data. So where do you recommend that people find that data, first of all, that's comparable? Just like Google it, or is there anywhere that they should look specifically?
Yeah, Google is absolutely the best place. There are tons of resources, tons of, webinars on LinkedIn, the SlideShare app, and you can find tons of salary surveys. I got one the other day from a headhunter, from a recruiter, and they were like, "Here's all the people that we've placed in your, in executive positions in North Carolina," and they had a giant list of, the positions and their salaries. And to be honest, I was blown away by what some people were getting, as executives here in North Carolina. And it definitely informed not just me, but, if I was asking somebody for a raise, like that would be an incredible piece of paper to slide across the table to them. Like, look what, this set of, this skill set, look what my skill set is worth on the market.
Okay, so that's awesome. And then let's move to the big three. One thing that I saw that you had said is the 10,000 a year, right? Is there a magic number that you're thinking? Is there a percentage? Should people go for the big number, or should they go for the $2 hour raise per hour raise? What's the best approach you feel like with something like that?
Everybody's going to be different, I think. It's all situational. But if, I was making $40,000 a year and I did some research and saw that everybody else in my geography that had my job title was making $50,000 a year, I think a fair ask would be to increase to at least a midpoint, or, to maybe the ask was to increase to the 50 and settle for the midpoint. I think there's a lot of, negotiating skills that, we could talk about at some point, about how to get to where, because it's all about being fair, right? Like, we want to feel like, as humans, that we're being treated fairly. And a lot of the discontent, and probably a lot of the reason people are listening to this, is that they don't feel like they're being paid what they're worth, that it's not fair to them. And if they were being paid fairly, they'd look at things, a lot different. So it's not about, is it $1 or is it $5,000 or is it $20,000? It's all about getting to where you feel like you're being fairly compensated for your contributions.
Okay. So we were talking about earlier, like the current climate and not taking advantage of your bosses or giving them an ultimatum. Do you feel like this is a good time for people to be asking for raises, or what do you think the approach should be during COVID right now?
Yeah, I think it's less about, a good time or a bad time to ask for a raise, other than a good time to find that information and to be prepared to have a conversation about what's fair, with the people who are making decisions about what you're, being compensated. And
Eventually.
yeah, I believe that, getting a raise is a process. It's not something that you hear me give advice and you go have that conversation next week, or you hear something on the podcast that sounds like a good idea and you click off the podcast and walk over to your boss's office. That's not my advice.
Okay. That's good clarification.
Yeah, I think this is a very strategic thing. This podcast, you said in your intro, it's for smart people who, have the ability to sort of plan ahead these conversations and get ready for the comp review, get ready for their review every year.
Okay.
And that's what I'm thinking is, my advice is how to get ready for the review, not how to go tomorrow and get a raise.
Yeah. So is part of getting ready for the review also having other options? Like if they can't pay compensation, are you trying to get another week of vacation, or are you trying to get more sick pay, or is that something that you feel like people should be prepared with as well?
Absolutely. I see and hear, or have in my career, people not realize that compensation, your total compensation, is made up of different things. For example, it's not just your paycheck. You could, be paid $50,000 a year, but if you are also given a company car, all of a sudden, you're not having to pay out of your $50,000 for gas and insurance and maintenance and, a car payment. So a company car could really be worth $10,000 a year in your compensation. And same for, extra vacation days, right? Days you don't have to, you don't have to show up at work, or you don't have to actually contribute paid vacation. That is on top of comp. Paying health insurance for you rather than splitting it or making you pay it. That's all part of compensation. And I don't feel like people recognize that enough. So a fair ask might be, I know you can't give me a raise right now, but, I know that you have company cars, and that's already factored into the overhead. And if you could give me a company car, that'd be, a great little, bump to my compensation that I think is fair.
Okay. So having options is a good idea going in.
Yeah, understand what compensation or what your company already does, and asking for things they're already doing for other people
Right.
is almost like it's the easy street, right?
Yeah.
If you're asking to use the company condo when only the president gets, or executive team gets to use that, I mean, that's one thing. That's
Right.
much harder. It's an uphill climb, but
I remember whenever I was working in the restaurant business, one of the other girls that was working counter with me, she was making like $2 more an hour than I was. And I found this out. And so it made me so upset that I felt like I was working harder and longer and I guess better than she was. And she was making more and she wasn't reliable. And I remember taking that kind of to my boss, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily the best approach, right? Like, hey, this person makes more than I do. I should make as much as them. Is that kind of what we're saying too? Or no, not really?
I think it's a much weaker argument.
Yeah.
Much
yeah,
weaker.
for sure.
Yeah. Not that it, wouldn't work or appeal to your boss's sense of fairness, but, what executives and business managers and owners, they manage to budgets a lot of times, and they have terminology that they use and vocabulary that they use, and they understand productivity and savings and that kind of stuff. And I feel like a much stronger argument would be for you to couch your value and the fairness of your compensation in terms of how you're impacting the bottom line. So if you can go in and say, look, I've landed this client and, that client contributes $1 million to our bottom line every year, and I'm the one who manages the relationship, that's worth money, right? That's
Right.
hard compensation. But to say Jane makes $50,000 and I only make 46, I think I deserve a raise up to 50.
No.
Yeah, that falls apart pretty quick.
It didn't work very well
There's
for
no
me.
hard connection. I'm suggesting that you go and capture your contribution in terms of, in business terms that managers understand and that the CFO understands of your company, because a lot of times your boss isn't the one making the decision about your compensation. They may love you to death and think that you're worth, millions. Of the last turnaround that I did, I had folks who were worth, $100,000, only making 60. And try as I might, and as much as I would argue for those people to make even 80 or 90, that it just wasn't happening. The CFO didn't see it in terms of contribution to compensate somebody that much. So, you really have to dial in what you're bringing to the business in dollar terms, language they can understand, and present it, make those connections super solid.
So that rolls me into my next question. Like, sometimes there are real financial constraints for businesses. Like, they believe that you're worth more money and they want to pay you more money, but it's just not in the cards for them at that time. How do you suggest kind of wading through those types of situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've been in that spot myself as a business owner, and wanting to pay folks more money, realizing their contributions, and just because we had a bad job or a bad year or something, not being able to really pay them what even I thought they were worth. And so I think coming from a position of someone who's asking for a raise, if you're in a small company that has real financial constraints or maybe is having a bad time, then you really have to look for non-financial bumps in the comp. So that looks like time off, telecommuting, the company car, paying the health insurance, things that don't cost them as much as just giving you a $10,000 raise in your salary. Because another thing I don't think people realize is that why those non-monetary raises are easier is because every time that a business, your boss gives you a raise, cash money, right? Like 50 to 55 or 50 to 60 or whatever it is, it costs them 10% more than the raise they gave you on their bottom line. So if a company gives you a $10,000 raise, it really costs them $11,000 to do that because of employer taxes, unemployment taxes, workers' comp, all those things are based on payroll dollars, their percentage of payroll dollars. And so the lower they can keep their payroll, it's kind of leveraged to lower cost across the board. But asking for an extra week of vacation is a no-brainer for them. It costs them nothing.
It doesn't. How does it not cost them nothing? I don't understand.
It costs them nothing. Like, they don't have to pay any more money out the door than what they've already been paying.
So, like, paid time off, almost?
Yeah, you're just not there contributing to the company.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that you're not keeping up with your clients or, keeping up with your deadlines or still managing your team. You're just not necessarily in the office 40 hours that week. Yeah, absolutely.
But you'd still be preparing and everything to leave for the week, and then you would make up or pick up.
Well, of course, you have to keep up with your responsibilities.
Right.
We're not saying, ditch completely, but
yeah.
In fact, you may be, and you could argue the fact, and there's some research out there, that you're more productive.
Yeah,
you're more productive because now you have deadlines and now you have to catch up, and you want to prepare to not be there. But that's stretching, right, a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some companies that have moved to like unlimited vacation, just so that their teams have the leeway.
So I think that that's my my contribution to the conversation is that. You have to do it correctly. There's no ultimatums or taking advantage of people. You have to value, your company and the people who run it just as much as you expect them to value you. But there is typically gaps, and especially in small businesses, between market value and what you agreed to come on to work for, whatever it was last year or a month ago or 10 years ago.
Right.
And it's unlikely that your salary has kept up with the market rates. And there's some gap there that you should understand how to go and do the research and figure out what to ask for to make it more fair to you. And so you feel fairly compensated for your contribution. I think that's a relatively easy thing to do for most people.
All right, so I really appreciate you coming on the show, Travis LeFever.
That's right. I help you.
Thanks. You're a smart guy.
Oh,
I think that you added a lot of value and definitely gave some great advice around getting a raise. So how can people find you or ask you questions, or if they need any clarification around what we talked about, where can they hit you up?
Oh, yeah. I'm happy to help any way that I can. You can find me on LinkedIn, right? Travis LeFever. The one in North Carolina, not the one in Colorado. He hates it when
I didn't know there was a guy in Colorado.
Oh, yeah. And unfortunately, he's also in construction. So a lot of folks get us confused. But or you could just connect with Amanda. Of course, she'll get us hooked up. But on your Instagram or raiseuppodcast.com, of course, you can just put, "Hey, Amanda, let me talk to Travis" in the contact email.
Oh, that's hilarious. I will pass on the information very quickly.
Or I can give you Amanda's cell phone number. And you
Don't give. Oh my. I guess you could give out my cell phone number. I might not answer it, though, because I rarely answer numbers that I don't know. And I know you guys are the same way, so don't judge me for not answering telemarketers that pretend that they're my friends.
Maybe I can come back and tell some of my crazier raise stories. People asking for raise when they went bad and went good.
That would be awesome. Those are my favorite stories, to be honest.
Maybe in your podcast you could have like a war story episodes, right?
Ooh, like a bonus.
Right, like a compilation.
Yep, and that's, to be honest, that's how you get the bonus ones, is if you subscribe. So, subscribe to the podcast. Or, you can always like and share and take a screenshot of this episode and put it on your socials and tag me in it, because I want to connect. I want to see what you guys are liking and not liking, and, let us know. This is a community. It was Raise Up Nation, and we want to be in this together. So thanks again, honey, for being on the show.
My pleasure. See you guys.
Bye.